The year is 1943. From the sun-baked runways of a South Pacific island, a beast roars to life. Its colossal 18-cylinder engine shudders with a primal energy, a sound that promises both power and peril. The propeller, a blur of spinning steel, slices through the humid air. With a deep guttural growl, the F4U Corsair, a bent-wing masterpiece of American engineering, lifts from the ground. It is faster, more powerful, and better armed than any plane the Japanese have. In the air, it is a magnificent predator, a shining symbol of American innovation and a beacon of hope for the Allied forces in the Pacific theater. But on the ground, in the cockpits of new pilots, it was a different story. The F4U Corsair, this beautiful, monstrous creation, carried a dark secret. It was a killer of its own pilots. The historical context of the F4U Corsair's development is crucial to understanding this paradox. By the time the United States entered, World War II naval aviation had become a critical component of its war strategy. The skies over the Pacific were dominated by the Japanese Zero, a nimble and highly effective fighter. The U.S. Navy needed a plane that could not only match the Zero but outclass it in every measurable way. Vought, a leading aircraft manufacturer, responded to this call with a design that was nothing short of revolutionary. The F4U Corsair was built around the most powerful engine available at the time, the Pratt & Whitney R2800 Double Wasp. This colossal engine, which would eventually produce over 2,000 horsepower, gave the Corsair its blistering speed, making it the fastest fighter in the world at its introduction. But to accommodate this massive engine and its equally massive propeller, Vought's engineers had to get creative. The result was the iconic inverted gull-wing design. This distinctive bent wing allowed for a shorter landing gear strut, a critical detail for carrier-based aircraft, and also provided better ground clearance for the huge propeller. The plane's sleek, aggressive profile, combined with its 6 .50-caliber machine guns, made it an absolute terror in the air. On paper, the F4U was the perfect weapon, a game-changer that would turn the tide of the air war in the Pacific. However, the path from the drawing board to the carrier deck was fraught with challenges. The build-up to the Corsair's operational deployment was a series of trials and tribulations that would ultimately reveal its deadly flaws. Early test pilots were mesmerized by its speed, but were also quick to point out its treacherous handling characteristics. The F4U was a brute, a wild stallion that resisted taming. The most significant problem lay in its carrier suitability. Landing on an aircraft carrier is a delicate ballet of precision and control, a task requiring a stable, predictable aircraft. The Corsair, with its immense power and unconventional design, was anything but. The early stages of pilot training and deployment were a grim, rapid-fire education in the Corsair's dangerous nature. The Navy's testing found that the plane had a vicious stall characteristic, where it would drop its left wing violently and unpredictably, a phenomenon that could be fatal during the low-speed, high-stress environment of a carrier landing approach. The Corsair's huge engine and long nose also created a severe visibility problem. When a pilot was on final approach, the nose would be pitched up, completely obscuring the view of the flight deck directly ahead. Pilots had to peek around the nose to see the landing signal officer, LSO, a perilous maneuver that often led to missed signals and disastrous landing accidents. Pilot testimonies from this period paint a vivid, chilling picture of the challenges. One pilot, a young ensign, described his first carrier landing attempt. "I couldn't see a thing over that massive nose. I was flying by feel, by the LSO's frantic signals from my periphery, and by a prayer. It was like trying to thread a needle with a runaway freight train." The landing gear's tendency to bounce upon touchdown was another critical issue. The gear was so stiff that a hard landing would cause the plane to rebound, sometimes soaring, back into the air before crashing down onto the deck. This was a nightmare scenario on a packed carrier deck where a single mistake could trigger a chain reaction of disaster. The cumulative effect of these issues was a high attrition rate, not from enemy action but from training and landing accidents. New pilots, fresh out of flight school, were being killed in crashes caused by the very machine they were supposed to be flying into combat. The F4U Corsair earned the grim nickname Hose Nose for its long nose, and a far more sinister one, Ensign Eliminator. The Navy, faced with these grim statistics, made a stunning decision. Despite the Corsair's superior combat performance, it was deemed unsuitable for carrier operations and was offered to the Marine Corps, who would fly it primarily from land bases. This decision was a turning point in the Corsair's early history, saving it from being scrapped and setting it on a new path to glory, a path that would eventually lead it back to the carrier deck, but only after its deadly flaws were tamed. The Corsair's redemption, the Marine Corps, with its land-based operations, became the unlikely savior of the F4U Corsair. For the young Marine pilots flying out of muddy makeshift airstrips on islands like Guadalcanal, the Corsair was a revelation. It was the tool they needed to wrest control of the skies from the dominant Japanese Zero. Freed from the perilous ballet of carrier landings, Marine aviators were able to fully exploit the Corsair's immense power and speed. They developed new tactics to leverage its strengths, primarily the hit-and-run maneuver. Instead of getting into a close-quarters dogfight with the nimble Zero, a fight the Corsair was not built to win, pilots would use their superior speed to dive on a target, fire a devastating burst from their 6 machine guns, and then use their momentum to climb away, out of range, before the Zero could even react. This change in tactics was a turning point in the Pacific Air War. Marine pilots, who initially viewed the Corsair with a healthy dose of fear, began to see it for what it truly was, a magnificent, albeit unforgiving weapon. They learned to respect its power and to master its challenging characteristics. The plane's reputation began to shift from a pilot killer to a Zero killer. The Corsair's long-range capabilities also made it an ideal platform for bomber escort missions and ground attack runs, where its heavy armament could wreak havoc on enemy positions. The distinctive whistle the plane made in a dive, caused by the air rushing over the oil coolers, earned it another far more menacing nickname from the Japanese, Whistling Death. The peak intensity of the Corsair's legend was arguably in the fierce air battles over the Solomon Islands, and later, during the invasion of Okinawa. These were not just dogfights, they were epic, high-stakes contests where the fate of ground troops often depended on the outcome. The F4U excelled in this environment. It was a rugged plane, able to absorb a tremendous amount of punishment and still make it back to base. Its powerful armament meant that a single well-placed burst could tear a Zero apart. One of the most famous anecdotes comes from Marine pilot and ace, Gregory "Pappy" Boyington. As the leader of the legendary Black Sheep Squadron, Boyington used the Corsair's strengths to great effect, amassing a significant number of kills and becoming a household name. Boyington, a veteran pilot who knew the limitations and strengths of his machine, understood that the Corsair was not just a plane. It was an extension of the pilot's will, a blunt instrument of war that, in the right hands, was an unstoppable force. The aftermath of the Corsair's land-based success was a stark contrast to its initial rejection. The Navy, witnessing the incredible performance of the F4U in combat, was forced to re-evaluate its stance. Vought, the manufacturer, had not been idle. They had worked tirelessly to address the plane's flaws, implementing a series of modifications to improve its carrier suitability. The tail wheel was strengthened to prevent the bounce on landing, a bubble canopy was added to improve visibility, and the stall characteristics were refined. The British Royal Navy, who had also received Corsairs, were the first to successfully operate them from carriers, pioneering a new landing technique that involved a curved approach to the flight deck, which helped pilots maintain a visual on the LSO. These lessons, combined with the technological improvements, finally allowed the F4U to take its rightful place on the carrier deck. The long-term impact of the F4U Corsair on naval aviation and warfare was immense. It proved that a large, powerful, and heavily armed fighter could operate effectively from a carrier, paving the way for the development of modern naval jets. The Corsair was not a perfect plane, but its journey from a deadly liability to a legendary war machine taught a crucial lesson: that sometimes a revolutionary design requires a revolutionary approach to its use. It wasn't the plane that was flawed, but the initial strategy for its deployment. The Corsair's reputation, once stained by tragedy, was washed clean by the blood of enemy fighters and the courage of the pilots who learned to master its ferocity. In C. Reflection. The story of the F4U Corsair is a powerful testament to the human spirit of innovation and adaptation. It is a story of a machine that, in its early days, was a metaphor for the dangers of pushing the boundaries of technology. It was a lesson learned in the most brutal way possible, with the lives of young pilots. But it is also a story of a nation and its fighting forces adapting, learning from their mistakes, and turning a flawed design into one of the most feared and respected fighters of the war. The Corsair's legacy is not just in the number of kills it amassed or the battles it won, but in the lessons it taught about the complex relationship between man and machine, and the ultimate truth that a weapon is only as good as the warrior who wields it. The bent-wing beast, the whistling death, the ensign eliminator, all these names tell a different part of its story, but the final lasting legacy is one of triumph, a story of a killer tamed and a legend born.